Bells. Please welcome Ash Williams.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's pull this up a bit. It doesn't help to be tall sometimes. Okay. Good morning. So, yeah, thanks. I'm really kind of honored to be talking about values-driven marketing. Some of you also may know it as purpose-driven marketing, but it's fundamentally the same thing. How do you kind of lead with values? And what I wanted to do over the course of the next 15 to 20 minutes is just break it down into three different parts. So we're going to look at what are values, which may seem pretty obvious, but it's kind of always good to look at what they actually are. Why they're important. I'm going to show you some examples of values in motion, and I'll do it from the perspective of Keen. And I'm not going to say that it's the right thing to do. It's just how we do it, right? And I think as we go through this, depending on whether you're a vendor or a brand, it's important for you to think about what your values are and why. More importantly, why are values important to you, and how do they manifest themselves? And maybe it doesn't manifest itself in a consumer-facing way, but maybe it only manifests itself in an internal way and how you do business with your employees and the sort of the brands that you work with. And then we're going to take a quick look at how do we measure them, which is always tricky, very tough. And I can just tell you some of the things that we've learned that maybe you'll benefit from. So before we get into that, what would be helpful is just a quick show of hands. Who has heard of Keen before today? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not what I thought, but that's awesome. Okay. So it's a little unfortunate you'll put your hands up because the next two slides might not be relevant. But I'll tell you anyway that Keen really started with a very simple question. And that question was, can a sandal protect your toes? There's always been sandals. I mean, that's kind of the first footwear that was really created and invented. But can a sandal protect your toes is a very simple thing, but it's also very difficult. And of course, the answer was yes. And that's really how Keen was founded. And we were founded back in 2003. This is when we first launched what is now the iconic Newport sandal, which, having chatted to some of you, I think that's the shoe, when you start to describe it, that a lot of you own. And since then, we've sold about 30 million pairs of Newports, and it's still one of our core franchises. It does phenomenally well. But you know, we are also very unique in the industry. There's a huge amount of consolidation. There's big holding companies like Amma, who I used to work for, that are now Anta. There's Wolverine. There's Deckers, and there's VF. So there's a huge amount of consolidation that's going on. But we're very unique in the industry that we're still family-owned. Our owner is still heavily involved in the business and is in the office probably once a week. But we're also more than just that sandal. We are in lifestyle. We're in kids. We have a growing workwear business as well. So we make utility boots with sort of steel toe caps and things, which is pretty amazing. We're based in Portland, Oregon. And we have global offices in Canada, Rotterdam, and Japan. And we're in most countries in the world, either directly through our subsidiaries or an agent or a distributor business. So what I wanted to do is just take a quick look at what values are and why they're important. So this is just a definition of what a value is. And it's a broad preference concerning appropriate courses of actions or outcomes. As such, values reflect a person's sense of right and wrong, or what ought to be. The two key words there are actions and right and wrong. And they're the two words that I kind of want you to remember as we go through this. And if you're going to take anything away from this, just maybe those two words. It's actions and right, that sort of difference between right and wrong and what ought to be. So why are values important? I think two of the main reasons are that values create a strategic and sort of moral direction for how you do business, how you interact with employees, how you interact with the vendors. But another thing that's really important about values, and we'll come on to talk about that, and I have a couple of examples of this, is if you have established values that you live by as a brand or a vendor or an organization, when you come across challenges and issues in your business, which inevitably we all do, they help steer you, right? So if you're living by your values and things happen, if you're living by your values and being true to who you are, those values and those value sets will help you steer through those sort of bumps in the road. So they become really important. And for some of us in the room who are talking to a younger generation, values are really, really important. There was a study recently that said 7 out of 10 US millennials will actively look for brands that reflect their values, right? So it's no longer a nice to have, it's imperative. You know, that trend is also true for baby boomers and Gen X. And if anything, it's trending more and more so. I think for our parents and our grandparents, probably not such a big deal, right? But that trend is definitely shifting as there are more sort of social, environmental issues in the world. I think more and more people are getting behind brands that have sort of values as part of their core. So this is kind of something I think about a lot, and I always see marketing as a sort of blend of art and science, right? We all have a ton of data that we can leverage, and I think what values can do is they can make the science feel like art, right? So as a consumer, do you want to know, or would you care that there's a cookie and you're being retargeted and there's attribution models and yada, yada, yada? Probably not, right? What you don't want to feel is you're being sold to. And I think if you put your values at the front of what you do, then it makes the science feel like art. And that is ultimately what you want your consumers to feel. You don't want them to feel they're being sold to. You want them to feel that they're being talked to about or talked with about things that they value and they care about. So that's another reason why they're incredibly important. And another really important thing here is that you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. We talk about this a lot internally, and this whole idea of do not say. And it may sound counterintuitive here, but living by your values is something you should do because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a tactic that you can use to sort of curry good favor with a consumer. So I wanted to come on to this and talk about this real quick. So I have a couple of free shoe cards here that I'm gonna give away. So this is the first question here is, can anybody tell me for a free pair of Keen shoes, what Keanu Reeves and Little Caesars Pizza have in common? You can just shout it out.
They're both bad.
They're both bad? Bill and Ted's. Okay. Any others? Because I don't want to take these home. So we were just talking about doing and not saying. Bit of a clue. Somebody could just say it, and you get a free pair of shoes. Somebody say, do not say. Do not say. Okay, I'll give you. Well then. So yeah, they basically they've been living by their values for some time, and you wouldn't really connect Keanu Reeves with values, and you wouldn't really connect Little Caesars Pizzas with values as well. But what I found really interesting, and these two articles popped up in my feed in a relatively short space of time, and that they use the same word. They're completely different news outlets, but they both said quietly, right? Which was really interesting, that they've both been doing this for years and years. Keanu's been donating. He has a fund. He has a foundation. He donates money to children's hospitals and cancer research. And then Mike Litch, who's the owner of Caesar's Pizza, was paying Rosa Parks rent for years. And I don't know this for a fact. Keanu never returned my calls, funnily enough. But I'm guessing they did this because it was something they valued, and they didn't do it for any other reason, right? These stories may never have come to light, but they did, and as a result, they're that much more powerful. They didn't push these stories out. It wasn't a PR stunt. They did it because they valued it, and it was something they cared about. And that's, you know, again, it goes back to that point. It may sound counterintuitive, but doing something and using it as part of your marketing campaign and sort of saying, hey, look at us, we did this great thing, it can come across as a little disingenuous. And so I think it's trying to find that balance. And I'm not saying don't talk about it, but it's trying to find that balance of when do you talk about it, how do you talk about it, And that's a really important point. So values in motion. This is a key thing for Keen, and I'm just going to tell you about some of the things that we do. I hope this doesn't sound preachy. It's not meant to. We are not kind of a bunch of hippie tree huggers. This is, it's not like tambourines at lunchtime kind of thing. These are our values. We live by them. They're super important, and these become filters for things that we do, and we refer back to these every single day. Which is super interesting. And I would also say in our product development team, as they're building products, they have something they call the 3 Vs, one of which is values, one of which is venture for adventure, and one of which is versatility. So when they're developing product, if the product that they're briefing in and developing doesn't hit on those 3 Vs, it doesn't make it through the process. So values are incredibly important for us. The key thing about values is they have to start from within. And when I say start from within, that also means they have to start from the top, right? Values can't be something your marketing team puts together and pushes out to say, hey, we're donating 1% of our proceeds to a cause. It really has to start from the top. It has to be your owner, your founder, your CEO, your C-level board. That if they don't live those values, then you're not truly a values-driven organization. And this is really evident for Keen, and really, I mean, we've been a values-driven organization from day one, and this was something we posted on our website back in 2004, and this was just after the tsunami in Asia, where our owner was sitting at home, and this was fairly early on in that year, and excuse me, he saw the news about the tsunami hitting Asia. And he picked up the phone and rang our advertising agent and said, stop all of our advertising. We're not going to spend any money on advertising this year. We're going to take that whole advertising budget and give it to disaster relief in Asia. Because it sort of resonated with his values, and it was the right thing to do, right? Right and wrong, right thing to do. And then when we talk about values in motion, I'll show you some examples of what that looks like for the organization, right? So we moved into this building about 5 years ago. It's in the Pearl District. I don't know if anybody knows that. It's actually the building that supposedly is the name of the Pearl District. It's the Pearl Building. And it's a five-story building. It's 100 years old. It's had multiple tenants over the years. But what was interesting about this is that in the process of renovating, which took about a year before we moved in, we threw away one dumpster of trash, right? One single dumpster of trash. A project of this size, you're talking about 50 or 60 dumpsters of trash for a similar project. And when you go around the building, you'll see a lot of the materials that they pulled out have been upcycled into things that we now use every day. There's, our tables are pieces of sort of junk that have been repurposed and are now tables. So when you live by your values, this is the kind of thing that you end up doing. And this is really interesting as well. This is actually a little overwhelming, to be honest. But this is inside our building, and you've got 6 different recycling containers, right? So, again, you could say we're a bunch of sort of tree-hugging hippies, but this is what values look like in an organization, right? This is not anything we talk about, but this is how we are as an organization, and everybody within the organization follows this, and you have to determine which container to put your recycling in, which can take some time, but this is what we do. And then, other things as well, like you won't find a plastic straw, you won't find the swizzle stick things. Our swizzle sticks are made of pieces of pasta, right? Pasta so you can sort of stir them around. Reusable straws. There's no straws, there's no plastic plates. We're constantly living by our values in terms of looking after the environment and being aware and conscious of how to do that. So that's all well and good, right? So we have free straws and recycling, but we also kind of have to put our money where our mouth is as well. And every employee gets 40 hours of paid time off every year to go and volunteer. And I would say most people use it. And we do sort of company events where we'll all go out and do something, or people can go and volunteer and do things, in their local community and sort of give back. which is a really important thing to do, and we encourage it. So we really want our employees to get out there and give back to their communities. We have a really robust grants program where we have an application process 2 times a year, and people write in, and we give funds out to sort of environmental and youth-orientated causes. And over the course of the last 15 years, we've given away about $18 million. And again, it's easy to give away money, and it's easy to donate percentages of profits to things, but we are actively involved in a lot of these different causes, and we don't just give them money, we work with them, we support them, we give them other sort of aid as well. And these are some of the other organizations that we work with around the world, from IOCA in Europe to CPAWS in Canada to Miranomori in Japan. A lot of us are involved in boards, in nonprofit boards. I'm on the board of Outdoor Afro. We have people in Leave No Trace and the Conservation Alliance. So a lot of us are actively involved in those things and dedicate our time to helping those causes as well. So this was a really interesting one. This was something we put together. This was back in 2015. It was called the Live Monumental Tour. So the idea of this is that we knew that President Obama was sort of coming out of office. And as the outgoing president, he had the ability to use the 1906 Antiquities Act that was signed into law by Theodore Roosevelt, where as the outgoing president, he could award monument status to public lands to make sure they were protected. So there's 5 different pieces of public land that were up for protection. And so we bought a 1970s GM RV, painted it yellow, got a crew together, worked out a schedule, came up with a campaign, and traveled around the country to collect signatures that we would deliver to the White House to basically encourage President Obama to use his powers to leverage the Antiquities Act. So just want to show you a quick video of what that looks like.
In the summer of 2015, a crew from Keene set off on a cross-country road trip with the goal of building a movement to protect public lands and to prove that when we combine our voices, we can have an impact that echoes across the generations.
There's a whole group of people who care deeply, care profoundly about creating lasting change.
The movement continues to grow because there's work yet to be done.
To know these places is to love them, and the more we know, the greater the sense of urgency.
Every mountain pass, every crystal clear stream and desert sunset only reminds us that if we want it, this feeling can last forever.
It already belongs to all of us, and if we stand up and make our voices heard, it always will.
Okay, so that was it was a great program. It was really successful. The goal was to collect 100,000 signatures. We didn't collect 100,000. I think we got about half of that. But we did the tour. We delivered the signatures to the White House. And I think as a result, I think four of the 5 areas ended up being protected. So somebody, you might say, so what, right? It's great. I would expect you to do that. What was interesting about this and what was unique, and I think why I wanted to talk about it, was that coming into the year, we had Live Monumental didn't exist, right? Nobody had thought about it. It was on no one's radar. We had a campaign. We knew what we were doing. We had the year planned out. But this was, through somebody who worked on the board of the Conservation Alliance, this was something that came up, and it was kind of a reaction to an opportunity, right? And I think that was probably in sort of March, April time. So we made the decision that this was something we had to do to support that cause. And so we put it together in the course of about 2 months. So we bought this RV, we painted it yellow, we did the whole thing. We put the tour together, we brought in some key retail partners, and we put this program together in a really short space of time. The other thing is that almost to our detriment, I would say. We didn't really talk about it, right? We didn't use this as a marketing tactic. This was not something we did to curry favor with consumers. Our return on ad spend was probably 0 in terms of a measurable metric. We didn't ever mention selling anything off the back of this. That would have just gone against the grain so much. There was no way anybody in our building once thought about trying to sell product off the back of this. This was a genuine call to action for Keen to leverage our kind of economic power to do good and give back, right? So that kind of is why it was super important. And that's now continued. And whilst we still have the RV and we still do a lot of sort of events and activations, this was something that we developed last year, and these are voice over IP phone booths. So we have about 5 phone booths now that we take to different events, and what this enables consumers to do is ring up their local representative, state representative. So you ring Capitol Hill, and we have a series of scripts, right? So you can flick through the scripts, and you can find something that you value, or you can just ring up your local representative and talk to them. But these are phone booths where you can ring up your local representative and make sure your voice is heard. It's free. We don't, it's a way of enabling our fans to leverage their values as well. And this is, obviously we're a product organization. We make product, and we have to sell product to stay in business. But values are incredibly important, even in that sort of product supply chain as well. So, and these are some of the sustainable technologies that we work with. So one is natural odor control. It was great hearing about the products from yesterday that use coffee oil. We have the Better Leather Working Group, and then PFC Free. So these are some of the sort of the more value-driven technologies that we work with. And I just want to touch on real briefly on PFCs, because this is such an important one. And PFCs are something we all love, right? It's the durable water repellency that a lot of us have, certainly on our outdoor gear. And these have been super popular for many, many years. And the thing about PFCs, perfluorinated carbons, is that they're incredibly durable, right? So durable they don't break down. But what happens is they build up over time, and they become incredibly toxic in the environment, to the point where they've recently done some research on some polar bears in the North Pole, and found that PFCs are in the bloodstream of these polar bears, and they're getting there because of the water supply, right? So incredibly toxic and carcinogenic and really kind of evil things that should not be in anyone's supply chain. So for another pair of Keen shoes, right? Talking big money prizes here. Can somebody tell me what these 3 products, the cups, many of which I can see some around here, you use them every day. There's a non-stick frying pan and carpet. What do these 3 products have in common? We were just talking about PFCs. PFCs. I thought these were layups, but Jesus. This must be early. Drink more coffee. Not out of one of those things. But they're so they're all around us. They're not just in outdoor gear. They're everywhere, right? And as people, we can all help reduce these things, right? Everybody picks up these paper cups and uses them for their coffee. They're evil, toxic things. We shouldn't be using them. The plastic cups you take in the gym. Sorry, I'm going to get preachy. Don't use them. You use them once, and it takes thousands of years for these things to decompose. Anyway, enough preaching this. So measure and learn. So really tough to measure values, right? But what we do is we pay a lot of attention to things like Net Promoter Score and our sentiment scores. And we sort of track and monitor those pretty religiously. But there's going to be times when it can get a little scary, right? So this is really interesting, where this was a sentiment score from last year, and we saw this huge negative spike, right? And when you look at what that triggered, it was a climate change post that we posted. And it gets a little scary, right? And if you're not a values-driven organization, or if you don't have values at the core of what you do, something like this could mean, wow, we got to change tack. We can't keep doing what we're doing. We're not going to do that anymore. But if you're truly values-driven, then this kind of thing you just weather. And we also know that over long term, our direction pays off, right? We're not doing it to pay off, but it does. Our sentiment remains high, our net promoter score remains high, but there's going to be times when this kind of thing happens and you get these huge sort of negative spikes. The other thing I would say as well, and something we've learned, so you can benefit from this learning, is that when we've turned those dials down of talking about values and being active in the market, we see a direct correlation in our sort of organic referral traffic. It goes down, and that has an impact on revenue. So whilst you may not be able to measure the impact of values directly, you can almost measure the impact of not talking about your values, right? I don't recommend it, but that is a way of looking at it, right? So we're pretty confident, having seen a couple of sort of bumps along the way, that when we stop talking about values, our organic referral traffic goes down, and that has an impact on our revenue. So just to sort of finish this up, I'd say there's really kind of four main learnings and 4 kind of key takeouts from this. One is that if you're to be a values-driven organization, it really has to run through the very core of your organization, and it has to start at the top, and it has to be lived by your sort of senior level executives. Another really important thing here is you have to look at it as a journey, right? It's not a destination, it's a journey. And you will start off in one direction, and inevitably you'll change and you'll make shifts along the way. But look at it as a journey and be open and transparent about it, right? There's a ton of research and a ton of studies. There was one done by Accenture recently that said 65% of global consumers are more willing to forgive brands that are values-driven and honest and open about what they're doing. So if you make a mistake, consumers are more likely to forgive you if you're truly a values-driven organization. And there's going to be times when it gets bumpy. So this is Caroline Gleich. She's one of our ambassadors. Again, we pick all of our ambassadors that sort of share our values. And we made a post about public lands. And there's a backlash, right? You get this backlash from consumers. A lot of consumers in the outdoor industry are pretty, have a particular political stance, right? And it become very polarizing. But you can see here, I think jumping into a political argument is a monumental mistake. Keep it simple and just sell good shoes. I'll buy them, but don't preach, right? Again, we could stop doing what we're doing because that's kind of scary, but we don't, because overall, people are very supportive of what we do. And the last thing I would say here is that if you think that sort of thinking, being values-driven is sort of difficult or scary in any way, don't be. Just, jump in, get your hands dirty. It's not perfect, and I think, the more open and transparent you are, the more people will forgive you along the way. So jump in and live by your values. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Anybody have a quick question for Ash? Yep. We have time for one.
Hey, Herb Jones with Fracture. I'm a huge Keens fan. I literally, just a day before the conference, ordered my 3rd pair. But I bought my first 2 pairs in retail, and it wasn't until I went on your website and ordered my pair of Austins that I really knew about this aspect of the company. And I understand not making it a marketing tactic, but how can you better push these values out and let people like me that actually want to know and want to connect with brands based on values? Yeah. When that's sort of like one of your main distribution channels, or your wholesale is so big for you.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? It kind of goes back to what we were saying before about it's a fine balance between doing and saying. It is something that we've thought about a lot and worked on. At the beginning of last year, we launched, I'm going to say, a campaign called Better Takes Action, where we were fully aware that we've had values at our core from day one. But again, to your point, we've never really talked about it in any great detail because I think we're so concerned about being genuine and authentic. Like I said, it's almost to our detriment. But we are bringing those things more to the forefront. We're telling more stories. We actually made the move this year to use only user-generated content. We don't do any brand shoots. We're only using user-generated content now. We're letting our fans kind of tell those stories, and we're pushing values more and more to the forefront of what we do. But it's the tip of the iceberg. We do so many things. When we have dedicated teams of people. We have a team called the Keen Effect team, and they look at sort of reducing impact, doing good, and giving back. And we don't really talk about it. I mean, you can go to our blog and you can see things and check it out. But yeah, it's an interesting one. We do it more, but we're still super cautious of not saying things for the sake of saying it.
Ash is going to be leading the roundtable on this at the end of the morning. Ash Williams, that was great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.